So I guess you have to. It takes. It's so funny to be a minister in this way because you're just resigned to the fact that usually there's like a hero element to it. Did you have to let that part of yourself die at any point? Because even you're saying like I'm doing my job. If these people stop coming a lot of times,
Yeah.
that's got to be like. I guess if you're, I mean, in the most Christian way, it's good, but to me, that's just not any way that any minister I've ever encountered or met thinks.
hmm There was definitely a lot of ego that had to die. There was a lot of deconstruction that had to be done that still needs to be done. I'm still working through the baggage that I collected from my tenure in ministry for the past 20 years. Um, but honestly, I mean, it's fulfilling now. It's much more beneficial for me personally to just let that part of me die and not feel like this person that needs to come in, with this white savior complex, and I need to save, the community from eternal damnation and save people from being unaware of the teachings of Jesus and save people, you know, from experiencing things that I have no idea what it's like to go through. Like instead, I get to join them and, listen to them and participate how they would want me to. And we build more genuine relationships that way. I have more genuine conversations with people now than I ever did as an evangelical because everybody was scared to tell me what they were going through because they were terrified I was going to judge them. And I would have because that's what I was taught to do. But
And you had your own fears at the same time. I mean, this is part of the
exactly.
reason that Steve left his ministry is that he felt like he wasn't being honest because he was doing these things on the side. And it was like, how can I tell people not to do this stuff and then do it myself? So
hmm
there's just walls up on both sides. I mean, you've
Absolutely.
also, because of the way that you've structured the church and the brewery financially, you've made a choice that you're never going to be rich from being a pastor,
No, no.
which is
Luckily,
so un-American of you.
I I am blessed. I do have a sugar mama. My wife works at Stanford, so we make
Oh.
she makes all the money. So I do have that benefit there. But even if I didn't, before we were married, I lived in a little studio micro apartment and had resigned myself to never, becoming super wealthy. And I don't say that to project a message that ministers shouldn't be taken care of. If they're good ministers, like the ones we mentioned before, that do exist, especially in the Bay Area, I think they should be paid a livable wage. I am fortunate enough to be a part of a denomination called the Disciples of Christ that sets a precedent for how much a minister can make, which is
Wow.
you cannot ever make more than the local high school principal makes. If you make more than the local high school
Whoa.
principal makes, then you are making too much money. So, I mean, you can make a living as a principal, but you're never going to get rich. And I think that is a standard that should be adopted by every church. You should have your needs met, absolutely, if you're doing the work, but you should not be rolling up in Bentleys, having your own fucking private jets. Like, that is disgusting.
Yeah.
He tells a funny story. He lied to his wife, Amy, the first few dates they went on. Or no, the first time they were talking for a few days. He didn't tell her that he was a minister.
No, man, that never went
Did
well.
you say you were a musician or a brewer or something?
So what I told her was that I had two jobs. I
I'm
said,
a drummer, number one.
those are actually the church drums. If anybody wants to buy these, we don't have a church building anymore. I'm just trying to. I don't play drums anymore. I'm just sitting in my office. But they look cool on video. They look like I'm way cooler than I am. But I told my wife at the time I was a musician. I do play guitar and I loop and I sing. And I told her I was like, I can tell you one of my jobs, but I can't tell you the other. And immediately she was getting
Whoa.
Breaking Bad vibes. She was like, this guy cooks meth totally with the beard and everything. Or she thought I was like a secret agent or works for the government or, did something illegal. Like I was like, I don't know, selling drugs or, she had all these ideas about who I was that are just way more intense than who I am. The reason why I didn't tell her is because when you tell people that don't know progressive spirituality or Christianity exist and you say, "Hey, I'm a pastor," they totally change who they are. They apologize for saying fuck and I'm like, fuck that. I say fuck all the time. And they won't drink around you, and they'll just start like treating you like you're a walking confession booth. And I don't
Yeah.
like that because I never get to know people for who they really are. So when I meet new people, it doesn't happen as much locally anymore because I've been here for a while. But if I'm traveling and they ask what I do, I'm like, oh, I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I never tell them. And I'm not trying to be mysterious. I just want to really get to know them. So my wife was clueless when we first met. She goes into this bar, it's packed, and we were like, well, we don't have any seats here, but there's a place down the street. I was like, we can ride together. I got my Prius out front. And she goes, okay, cool. And she jumps in. And one of the things that has always been a gift in my ministry from congregants is crucifixes, which is weird because it's a symbol of execution. Like if you're going to give somebody something, like why would you give something? It'd be like me giving you an electric chair on a necklace. It's just so weird. But I appreciate the intent behind it. So I used to hang them on my rearview mirror. So I just had tons of crucifixes there that were gifts.
Too many. I mean, 2 is too many.
There must have been 12 of them. So my now wife, then first date, looks in the mirror to kind of check her makeup and sees these crucifixes and is mortified because she was agnostic at the time and totally opposed to Christianity. And I get in the car and I go to look at her and I'm like trying to check her out. And she just looks terrified. And I see her glaring at the rearview mirror. And I was like, oh shit. And she goes, you're not religious, are you? I was like, no, fuck that. I'm not religious, but I am a pastor. And we had a really interesting conversation. She listened and only tried to run away 3 times, and I begged her to begged her to let me finish. I'm not like those assholes. And
you're like, I learned from the Songs of Solomon that you need to stay with me.
And I've read it several times. No, she's great, and she would still identify as agnostic, but a Christian ethically as well. And
since you've been together,
since we've been together, she did not come to church until after she and I had been engaged for a while. But when she did, it was a really refreshing experience for her because she didn't know anything outside of really conservative, judgmental churches. She had really traumatic experiences with the church growing up. So it's been nice for her. And what I would encourage any clergy that may be listening that are progressive, that have, congregations, but they're scared to talk about these hot button issues, talk about them. Like so many people would be refreshed and liberated if you just chose to stop coddling the extremist in your church. Like this whole, like, let's all get together and welcome everyone, even if they're racist assholes thing. I guess if you're a white person, that sounds nice. But in effect, what you're doing is you're creating a space that isn't safe or welcoming for people that are good people and that I think would find home and community in the church.
Well, that actually leads us to our final question. We asked this of all our guests. It's so funny because I think you might be one of our first pastors, though. But
Wow.
the question is, if you were to have your own church
or religion,
what would 3 tenets of that church or religion be? It could be practices as well, too. Anything that makes people feel centered, closer to God.
I think number one would be justice. That would be the tenet that I would have. The second,
what does that mean to you?
For me, it would mean that everybody has access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's spelled out in our founding documents that sadly is still not realized. I would say justice.
So I asked that for personal reasons too. I am obsessed with justice, but in many ways, I often conflate that with fairness, which is something that doesn't really exist. And also, I have to remind myself that I'm not necessarily like deserving or entitled in any way to personal fairness. And so that's why I ask, like, what specifically that means to you, because it's something I care a lot about, but I always have to, it's work to separate it from this individualistic and sometimes capitalist version of what I think, justice is. So I think, boiling it down to really just, people deserve to not be killed and be able to eat and be happy.
Yeah. People deserve to experience life, and we have the resources for everyone to have an abundant life experience. We just don't share them. But then we also, my second tenet would be equity, because we do have some reconciliation that needs to happen in our history. Equality sounds awesome for everybody. I think most people can get on board with that. Where people of privilege, from my experience in the church, have a kind of a hang up is when you start saying, and we need to lift up the people that we've oppressed for so long too. So equity until it's no longer necessary, which is going to take a long time, would be a second tenet of mine. And then the third.
So you support reparations, financial reparations?
Absolutely. 103,000%. Period. I think that's absolutely necessary. And the other thing would be conservation. I think we're destroying our blue boat home, our paradise in the universe. And we've got to do something to fix that, not just for ourselves, but for countless other cohabitant species in this world.
Yeah, I've watched a couple of your podcast clips, and you do talk a lot about climate change, which I really appreciate. I felt like that was not something when I was growing up in the church, and even living in the Bay Area, that, you know, occasionally our church might do like a beach cleanup, which is not, which is nice, but it's also like, you know, we don't want trash on the beach because we like to go to the beach. It was sort of divorced from like the greater issue.
Mhm.
And any talks of sort of environmental work or climate change were really discouraged. And I think partially because if you're living a life that your goal is heaven, and you
Mhm.
think the earth is going to be destroyed anyway, then why not speed up the process, essentially?
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad. It's sad. That problem, I think, stems from a very poor reading of Genesis. People read Genesis chapter 1. Firstly, it's problematic. They read it like it's a history book or like a scientific document. Major problem.
And it's not,
It's neither.
right? Okay.
It's a metaphor. It's a metaphorical poem. So God did not make the world in 6 days. Did not create humanity from dirt and a rib. It's a metaphor, and it was read as a metaphor before Christianity got a hold of it.
But women are sneaky.
That
part's true.
So are men, though. And they just they're just less ashamed because of privilege about sneakiness. They're just assholes. So I could say that because I used to identify as one. But I would say the other issue is when it gets to the verse where it talks about Adam being presented with dominion over the birds of the air and over everything that crawls and all of these things. Dominion implies stewardship in the original translation of the Bible. It does not imply rulership. And a mistranslation of that word has led us to the climate crisis that we're all experiencing now. Because if I had to point a finger as to who's to blame, it's the church. 100%.
Yeah, which includes, factory farming and all these things, and literally, I mean, I literally remember pastors telling me that it was okay to eat meat because of that verse in the Bible. Because we own the animals, we own the earth, so if we want to farm them and eat them, that's fine. And it's pretty crazy the impact that the current day evangelical church, positive impact they could have on climate change, that they just choose not to care. It's, I mean, add it to the list, but
absolutely. And it's antithetical to the teachings of ancient Judaic peoples. They definitely believed that this planet was a gift and it was their home, and they didn't believe they were going somewhere else. What they did believe it was that God was going to restore this world, and God was going to use them as participants in that restoration. So they were kind of co-creators of heaven on earth. That's what they believed. Now, I don't believe that's literal, but I do believe that's powerful. If we can view ourselves as co-creators of paradise, then what that implies is it's time to get to work.
I love it. Okay, well, so we should say, and we'll plug this in the beginning and in the show notes, but the brewery is called Greater Purpose Brewing, and for the time being, you can only get that by being in Santa Cruz, right? You don't do mail order beer or anything yet.
Working on it. And if folks want to check out my book, it's Reborn Again, Crucifying Christendom and Resurrecting a Radical, and Revved Up Theolitics is our podcast.
And how can folks join your online church if they want to check it out?
We've got several options depending on their preference. Podcast, I assume most of your listeners probably would be in that camp. So check out Revved Up Theolitics for listening. Or if you want to actually view it live, we project our sermons live on YouTube every week, Sundays at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So you're definitely able to jump on
And how do
there.
they find that?
Just type it in your search bar, Greater Purpose Community Church on YouTube, and our videos should pop up. And you could, not to be too cliche, but you can smash that subscribe button, and it'll notify you when those sermons go live.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christopher. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you for having me.